off topic, but are you familiar with the Qualia Quietist position? I'm not. Sophisticated philosophical stance that can be difficult to grasp because it requires unasking a question that feels very intuitive to most of us. In short, Qualia Quietism is the position that the problem of consciousness is not a scientific mystery to be solved, but a linguistic or conceptual confusion to be dissolved. Okay, that follows so far. To understand quietism, all right, what it's reacting against. We got the hard problem, Chalmers. Why does it feel like something? Right, okay. Quietist stance, dissolving it. You're asking the wrong question. They argue that we are bewitched by language. We treat qualia feelings as if they are magical, invisible objects floating inside our heads that need a special physical explanation. The quietist argues it is a pseudo problem. There is no gap between the brain and the mind. The gap is created by the way we talk about it. Right, so this is all stuff I would agree with. Focus on function. Once you explain the functions, how the brain discriminates red from blue, how it reacts to pain, how it processes language, you have explained everything. So, I mean, I wouldn't say everything, but you've explained a lot. And the point I try to make in that video that we made more recently is that what we're really looking for is stuff that feels like it explains what's happening, or why we feel a certain way, or why our feelings have the certain components that they seem to have. So we can intuitively think that there's some like linguistic aspect of our experience, and there's some affective aspect and visual aspect, so we can consider how this is all getting packaged together and why certain things are experienced differently, why there's differences of experience. This is what we mentioned pertains to what Anil Seth calls the real problem. There's no extra ingredient left over. Right. The issue is that you can't explain everything. It would be impossible to explain everything that's necessary. We are probably going to keep learning more about neural correlates that makes it more clear to us why we are conscious in the way that we are for the rest of our lives. So that's fun. Therapeutic philosophy. This approach draws heavily from Wittgenstein, who believed the goal of philosophy is to show the fly the way out of the fly bottle. Right. So this is what I'm trying to do on this channel and in the document, pointing out that we're not here to explain how the world is in some ontological sense, but to explain that what we're doing at the end of the day is communicating and talking about the world in ways that we understand. And we can be precise or ambiguous about that, and different people are going to infer different things from what we say. So yeah, the tricky thing about the hard problem is it's quite ambiguous in the sense that people can think many different things. Everyone has their own subjective view of their own consciousness. So this problem gets to live in many people's minds in different ways. The vitalism analogy, the best way to understand quietism is to look at the history of biology. In the 19th century, scientists struggled to explain life. They understood, so we made the same type of analogy. They understood anatomy, but they couldn't explain what made a body alive. They assumed there must be a special non-physical energy called vital spirit. We never found the vital spirit. We simply learned so much about metabolism, reproduction, and DNA that the question vanished. We realized that life isn't a thing added to the body. It is just the process of the body working. Right, we have to realize that the concepts that we think about, especially the concepts that we think about related to consciousness, are afforded to us by, most directly, our conscious experience. Like, that's how it manifests. But it's afforded to us by our unique biology, which is a product of nature and nurture, which is kind of what we've been talking about the past few days, how nature and nurture affects how we think. Okay, how is this different from physicalism or illusionism? Physicalism, qualia are real, and they're exactly the same thing as brain states. That, I would say, is like inappropriate way to describe qualia, because when people think of qualia, they're thinking of the feelings they have and not the processes that lead to what they think are separate feelings. You'd have to have a more complex description here. Like, qualia are it's the information that is revealed to the information knower about what they are feeling. You know, it's you need some recursive definition that points out that these are just, it's information mappings for the thing that's experiencing. But once again, it's like, what information are we experiencing? And we can only put that into words, but that information that we're experiencing is significantly more complex than the words that we try to bottle them into. So there's a tricky thing. Like, pragmatically, it just arises with the linguistics. That's why the linguistic philosophers have such a hold on contemporary philosophy, at least I believe. Illusionism. Qualia does not exist. We are tricked into thinking we have them. They are a user interface illusion. And quietism. The debate between physicalism and dualism is nonsense. the concepts we are using are broken. It's not that they're broken, it's just they're not what we think they are. Stop doing metaphysics and look at how we use language. Right, okay, that would be the same conclusion. Of course, we need to do some metaphysics for the approach that we have in the document, understanding the world and our freedom within it. We have to think about the world in such a way that makes sense of all these things, so we kind of do embark in metaphysics, but we do so in a way that still highlights how contingent our understanding is. Quietist refuses to play the game, right? Position is incredibly frustrating to so many people. Critics argue that quietists are essentially denying the most obvious data point we have, our own experience. I point out the same thing, that we cannot rely on what we believe is obvious data because it's still like a conceptual thought that arises through what we understand to be our consciousness. We can't trust it in a sense. It is similarly contingent and affected by our culture, our learning, etc. To a realist, a quietist sounds like someone screaming in pain while arguing that pain is just a linguistic concept. I think it would be that the linguistic concepts we have about pain do not capture the full essence of pain entirely. So the question is, like, what are we doing with the word? Like, what do we mean by pain? And so it always comes back to the linguistic discussion about the linguistics. When each of us think about pain, we're not thinking about the same thing exactly. Obviously, we could say that it's very intuitive for all of us because we have very similar physical bodies. Ignoring the intuition, even if the problem is linguistic, the intuition that there is a hard problem is very strong. That is true. This is a good criticism. Critics argue that quietism merely dodges the question rather than answering it. So we kind of went in the direction of actually addressing this. We don't play quietism in our video because we don't just say it's nonsense. We try to point out, hey, the thing that we're looking for is making the intuition that the hard problem is there and is strong less strong. What would make it so that we have an intuition that the hard problem is not as strong as we thought it was? Like, what leads us from now to that point? All right, that was a good deep dive. Thank you for the suggestion.